Hey guys, welcome back for another Trick Tip Tuesday. And for today's tip, I'm going to be talking to you guys about air tools, and specifically more like die grinders in that realm. So, in my experience fabricating, I always found that I always preferred an angle grinder or a straight die grinder that was something that had a little bit bigger grip on it. I guess more for ergonomic reasons, wanting to have something that felt more comfortable in my hand when squeezing on the trigger. So you can kind of see the difference between these two grinders. The one on the right here would be my preferred size, just based on pure hand comfort. Now these are all snap-on grinders, but they're built differently. So these grinders here that are a little bit bigger, these ones turn at about 20,000 RPM, whereas this smaller one here turns up to about 25,000 RPM. Now, what I have found is that I do prefer these bigger ones for the sense that when you're using it, when you're grinding with it, they have just a little more torque than these smaller bodied ones that turn at a higher RPM. So haven't really looked at the exact specs on them, but my thought is this one's got a little bit bigger motor. It's going to give you that good low end torque. Smaller motor is more high RPM. And I've always found that to be a little bit limiting on a small one like this when you're grinding, because the power of the grinding is all based on the RPM of the motor, and that the more grinding you're doing, the more pressure you're doing on the grinding, it tends to bog these down a little bit faster. So, and I've also found the triggers on these sizes, and it can vary. It's not just this brand, but a variety of other brands. You find ones of these that are more of an aluminum body on them, and so I've always found them to be just not as user friendly in the standpoint of you got to get the RPM up pretty high to be able to maintain your grinding. And what I like about this size, this is just the newer version of this grinder here. I've actually had this one here for probably, I don't know, 14 or so years at least. And I think I've had it rebuilt once, but it still works just as good as the day I bought it. And it's nice to have a tool that you can rely on, that you're not constantly trying to replace. So this being the newer version, basically the same thing, just different color grip, that sort of thing. But what I like about these is when you're using them, there's a good amount of trigger adjustment in them. So when you start up the sander, you can turn it at a lower RPM. And then work it up all the way up to the RPM range. Well, some of the other grinders I've used, and even I would say including this one, the trigger isn't quite as user friendly in that way. Like, you can make this one go fairly slow, but it doesn't take a whole lot of trigger movement to really make that thing pick up speed. So again, like I said, I've always just preferred these a little bit bigger ones for that reason, that you can have a little more trigger adjustment in that way. So like I said, with the torque aspect of them, when you're grinding on something, you don't always need that full RPM to be doing the work, getting the job done. So I found that being able to have a grinder that has a lower, that is able to be used at a lower RPM without bogging it down, it actually saves your abrasives. Heat is the #1 killer of abrasives. So the more heat you're putting into that abrasive, the obviously faster you're going to break it down and have to go through abrasives. Whereas I've found is that the slower you can turn it and still get the job done, the longer the abrasive is going to last you, and save you money on that end too. So whereas like I said, on these, it's all dependent on how much pressure you're applying to your part. But it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to really bog that down. So I'm applying a similar amount of pressure to this as I was the other sander, but you can see how quickly it bogs that down. So in these, like I said, you really got to bring that RPM up and use lighter pressure to get your work done, which is then, and still in turn, because of the amount of RPM you're turning, it's heating that abrasive up and it's going to make it not last as long. And I also think that the finished product on your sanding is not as good on something like that, where you're really turning at a higher RPM and having to move to where you're not removing too much material in one spot and that sort of thing. You know, as far as straight grinders, same thing. These are basically the same body. Obviously, one's just a 90-degree angle, the other one's straight. But again, especially when you're using cutoff wheel or a flap disc like this, the ability to not have to run it wide open all the time, it saves your abrasives and can still get the job done. So hopefully this tip will help you out if you're looking for angle grinder tools. Everybody's going to have their own opinions on what they like, and you're going to find something that you like. Like I said, I do have some grinders that are you know, Matco, some of those things, kind of just depending on what tool I was looking to buy. I've always found these ones here to be my favorite to use, as far as something I use, you know, daily, comfortable in the hand, easy to control the RPM on, and they last a really long time. So again, I've had this one here for probably 14 years or so. This one here is probably getting close to 10 years old, but they can last you a really long time, get your job done over and over again. So hopefully this tip will help you out again when you're looking for what air tool you might be wanting to invest in, and things you might consider as far as you know, how you're going to be using it, hand grip, that sort of thing. So thanks for watching this week's trick tip, and we'll see you in the next one.